Good afternoon. My name's Chris Fechner and I'm the Chief Information Officer of the Department of Planning and Environment. So the Department of Planning and Environment is a very diversified government agency. So you can see right in the centre of that diagram there, we've got the department, but we're actually a cluster, which is 27 odd agencies in New South Wales Government. So our principal role in government is to make people's lives better in government through having an effective planning and environmental control system in government, not just in current generations, but for future generations. So the principal agencies within our department are the Department of Planning and Environment, the Office of Environment and Heritage, and the Environmental Protection Agency. So they're the bulk of our policy administrative control functions. But we're also fortunate to have a number of iconic brands in our cluster as well. So you can see Taronga Zoo, Sydney Opera House, the Botanic Gardens, and some of the cultural institutions like the Art Gallery. So really complex things that we do. So our cluster has grown really rapidly over the last 4 years since it was created. And we now cover everything from the arts to zoos. So the A to Z of government as far as that goes. And also from an ICT perspective, we're a really interesting cluster because we do a lot of things from a different range of technology. So we have point of sale systems that run our visitor centres and the like. But we also have supercomputers that do climate models for future change in New South Wales environment over the next 20 to 30 years. So it's a great place to use technology. We're also really diversified. So the map that you're looking at now shows the 250 odd locations that we actually service. And you can see there's a cluster around the CBDs, but you can also see they go from every edge of the states. And the green that's sitting in there is actually the New South Wales National Parks estates, and that's 9% of the state's land mass. So there's a really big responsibility to make sure that everything that we do supports the social, economic and environmental health of the state. It's a difficult environment to service as well when you look at some of those geographic areas. So our objectives within Planning and Environment Cluster is to make sure that we're really looking after our environment, that we value and preserve our cultural and built heritage, that looks at building strong communities and councils, about making sure that our citizens are connected with their environment. Building a really strong Sydney and New South Wales in terms of the economic and social development of the environments. We're responsible also for management of the state's energy functions. So all those times when you hear about brownouts and change controls around making sure that there is sufficient energy supply, all fit within our cluster as well. Managing water. That there's some real issues in New South Wales with the effective management of both environmental and agricultural release of water, and our department looks after those particular things. Mineral resources, making sure that we've got effective, efficient and responsible use of our mineral resources, not just in, again, a single generation, but for multiple generations to come. And finally, an area that's fairly new to our cluster is the arts and culture environments. So they're the sort of things that mean that we've got really complex government activities, but there are some things that sort of link them together. And I'm going to talk a little bit about 4 initiatives that we're actually using with Pega. So housing is a real stress in New South Wales and making sure we've got it there. So one of our key goals within the principal department is 90% of housing approvals within 40 days this year. Now, going back in history, that number can be much bigger, sometimes double, sometimes triple, and sometimes within the bureaucracy of the links between local government and state government, things can get lost. The second one is halving the time for applications for state significant development. State significant developments are those ones that have a major economic, social or environmental impact to the state. And it includes things like the Barangaroo development here, coal mines in the Hunter Valley, and new town developments in certain locations as well. The third one I really want to talk about is effective management of environmental incidents. There is almost a constant issue in New South Wales with pollutants. Environmental incidents go through. So Williamstown is one that's fairly high in people's agenda at the moment around how we actually deal with an environmental contamination and how we actually process that, how we actually go right through about the cleanup and even into the prosecutions and recovery of those environments. And the last one, timely and efficient allocation of geological resources. Really high dependency across the state on making sure that those economic resources are actually leveraged to the full extent to support the current and future needs of the state, but also that we're actually responsibly managing the land that those resources are being taken from. So all 4 of those applications are our first 4 solutions within the Pega environment. As a state, I talked a little bit about in the previous ones, we're facing significant change as an organisation. So these are some statistics that have come from our demography areas, and I will apologise, our creative department's actually much less than NAB's and Accenture's, so we've got a few slightly more sticky diagrams in our presentations. So some startling figures nonetheless that's going in there. If you look at 64.7% of the state's population will be in the Greater Sydney region. And I think these are 2025 projections. We'll need 985,000 new homes. And if you've heard all of the recent furore around the Opal building and the impact of strata tenancies, a lot of New South Wales build is based on strata tenancies. So there's really big challenges to make sure that we maintain that social, economic and environmental balances for current and future generations. These growth in people, the requirement for infrastructure services. There's been enormous amounts of discussion about the impact of traffic management in a growing Sydney, and I'm pretty sure anyone who's driven in Sydney doesn't need to have that explained to them. And so I think really from that perspective, government really needs to balance how they do it, and we need to make sure that we can do this economically as well. From a technology change, and this is where my slides get really different in comparison. So Accenture talked about disruptive innovation, and my point about having that first slide with the green there is that our rate of change is really decreasing, and that's government stayed immune to that change for a long time, but we're really falling into the pace of that change now because of, I think, some other things that Accenture mentioned around the citizen or the customer expectation. We've got much more mature citizens now, and they expect things to be better, and they don't feel as bound to transactional interactions with government as they previously have been. They expect that same sort of relationship with their government as they do with their bank or they do with their social media functions. All those issues around cloud computing, Internet of Things, all the 4th industrial revolution are overtaking government. So government has had a really strong place around being the controller of things. They're starting to lose some of those controls, and we have to adapt to respond to that environment. Artificial intelligence, I believe one of the key functions of government is as a data capture and data provider for other purposes within New South Wales and broadly across government, but understanding how we actually interpret that data and how we actually make best use of it and how we get insights by putting it together in new and unique ways is really, I think, where the change is coming in government. And the last one, cybersecurity. Everyone would have heard recently about the breach of the Australian Parliament's sector. So these sort of things are happening to government every day. So every day we deny tens of thousands of attacks. The information that we're starting to hold is becoming more sensitive. So we have to have solutions that think about these things like security by design. Right. So when we look at those are the external drivers, these are our internal drivers. So I mentioned that the Department of Planning and Environment was formed in 2014. In that time, we've gone through several machinery of governments, and each one of those, we've increased our size and complexity significantly. So we have over 300 bespoke applications in our portfolio now. The maintenance costs associated with those are high. They have quite high legacy skill bases, so it's expensive for us to have those. We're actually seeing also changes, significant reductions in our investment profiles. So there's been a building slowdown across New South Wales, and that sort of goes to state revenue. And when that happens, the money dries up, and people are always looking for things like digital and technology to help reduce their ongoing costs. And when we actually get into these situations, we're definitely seeing things like our R&D capabilities suffering, which means we have to think about new and better ways about getting intellectual property into our organisation. Really significant for government, there have been some high-profile, really expensive, really long-running projects that have been failures or limited successes. And unfortunately, there's a perception that that's a characteristic of large ICT investments in government. So looking at that long project process and the reducing success rates is another way of doing things differently. The limited reuse that we're getting, so those 380 odd applications that we've got in our environments, many of them do similar sort of things, but with particular disciplines. So, you know, doing a grants application for a cultural tour versus applying for money to restore a historic house versus applying for a radiation licence in the EPA or a licence to harm. You know, the poor old brumbies up in the mountains that occasionally get in the press. So all those things have similarities, but they all have technically different solutions. And this is where we were really struggling with managing that really big portfolio. I do think the other thing that's really important, we talked about 150 odd people working in the NAB environment. My entire Pega team is here today, all three of them. And we have managed to scale and do work in our environment purely through the use of our partners and with the support of Pega in that environment. So it does mean that in our case, though, that we do have a high degree of fatigue because we're trying to do a lot and learn a lot within a really short time. Talked about needing to do things differently around the old ways of long projects with poor deliveries. We're very much pushing towards a product and a product line model within our organisation. So it's really about understanding how we get that better integration between our customers, our technology people, and our external customers as well, and making sure that we're actually vertically aligning those functions in a way that actually gives us benefits that we couldn't do with a functional model or a project-based model. And we are definitely seeing a great alignment with that, and I know with the NAB bank saying that they're getting their business customers more and more involved. That's certainly the goal that we have, because we need to get that much higher degree of collaboration in our environments, because the history of a lot of government projects is there's a really big collaboration up until the approval of the business case, and then there is a big step back until the delivery of the product, and then there is a big remediation cycle where we try and fix up all the things that people didn't like. So the product-based model and using a platform to underpin that product-based model is one of our really significant changes in the way we work. The second one is that operating model. In New South Wales government, there is traditionally a lot easier to get capital than it is to get operating. So they see it as a one-off investment. It's a bit easier to manage for Treasury, but it's certainly one of the things that makes running and life cycle management of solutions really difficult in government. So our move towards a continual improvement, a continuous funding function is really the second big change that we're doing. And the third one is around trying to manage that portfolio, really reduce that portfolio, moving from specific and bespoke as single solutions where our customers explain to the nth degree exactly what it is and we give them exactly what they want, to having a principle that actually starts with a build for reuse function. So thinking about, as a first principle, am I going to use this again? And it goes to that specialisation and inheritance. We chose to move down a path in Pega as one of a few products that we were actually doing that we were building on platforms. So I won't mention the others because it's not right to do so in this forum. But understanding why we had to do it was a key one, and I found quite a good slide that talked about it. Off the shelf didn't work in my environment. We had too many functions that were really such small scale that there was never really product spaces that satisfied them. Our bespoke development was kind of fine when we were 3,500 people and we had an IT department where we knew everyone and knew the businesses really well. But as we've scaled, we've fractured that model. So, we do get those solutions. They are great matches for it, but they really are more expensive. The Pareto principle definitely applies in bespoke. We're spending, 80% of our budgets on 20% of that functionality. And they are slow, and that point I made before about the cycle. We often get these things into solutions and we really find that the customer outcomes and the customer experience is really subpar because of something that's really based on a very process-centric view of the world. The other part of the transformation that we've really had to undertake is looking at moving to new ways of delivery. So Agile, DevOps, design thinkings, the things that everybody else explained much better than me this morning, also needed to be the thing that triggered our changes as well, internally and with our customers. So really making that combinational thing about moving away from trying to be everything to everyone, thinking about the things that we wanted to be good at, looking at a method that's not agile at scale, but look at agile at beginning. Now, we chose Pega for very much the same reasons as other people have done so today, but we're doing it at a very small scale. People are talking about 150 people, tens, even hundreds of millions of dollars in investments. We're doing this in hundreds of thousands and small millions of amounts. So we're building this up based on its successes, and it's scaling pretty well. But some of the principles are the same. Cloud first was one of our big drivers. Making sure that we had something that was component blocks, that we wanted to be able to orchestrate solutions, not build them all from scratch all the time. Easy API integration. We have hundreds of things that things need to connect to. We need to make sure that they can work well together. And I think a key one for us is the adaptable usage model that's sitting in that corner over there. Now, one of the things that we found that was really great with Pega is the flexibility around the licensing model and the usage. We've got 3 particular contracts that we've started with 4 solutions in place. And those variations have been put in place to understand the way that we're going to use it. So we might have 5 million citizens that might interact with this. We can't buy 5 million Pega licenses. So understanding how we adapt the model to support us was one of the really key things about this platform and why it's been useful for us. The other one was we can't afford to start from zero. There were too many things we needed to do. And having a product that was really mature, so 1977 started used by NAB here, we wanted to leverage all those things. So we knew that they were really good with business process. We were really okay at business process. So getting those things coming through, the case management, the CRM, the industry solutions. So I'll talk a little bit about our generational journey quickly, but the important thing about that is we really got a kickstart out of this environment. The layer cake is something that I've learnt to get into, but I can't say that we understood it to start with. So in the first case, we had an application called PSIMS. That's halving the time for major projects approvals. We built that like we've built everything in the past, and it was kind of bespoke. We ended up starting that about a year and a bit ago, and it went live on Monday. So it went live yesterday. So that's basically a year to build that. And then we started the next one, which is about halving that housing approvals time, e-planning. So we sort of got into that place and we thought, oh yeah, everything's supposed to be reusable in Pega. We hadn't built it that way. So we found that we couldn't really connect it. And we had the titles management system and regulatory systems, 2 new things all starting up before we got finished the first one. So we recognised that we really needed to use this layer cake function more to actually get that degree of specialisation and inheritance working better. So we thought about the ways that we would actually separate the details between, agencies, the cluster, looking at the enterprise layers, even things like how we could actually use things like the Pega government framework. All of our transactions are kind of government transactions. So thinking that as the start position was the key thing for us. But we also felt that we needed to do something that was more specific to our environment. So things like creating a planning and environment, framework layers for licensing. We use it all over the cluster. Why don't we actually have something that's a model that's the same? The generational journey that I'm talking about is, so this is a diagram that I don't want people to take literally. As I said, we've only been doing this for 2 years. So, hard to say generations in the true term of the word, but we've got some certain trigger points that sort of get into where we started to. We started in this world of bespoke, and we got to this is the sort of the results we got in what I call our Gen 1 environment. So this is our generation to start really small scale, hundreds of thousands of dollars, really big problem within New South Wales government. Our next generation was characterised by the e-planning environment. So that was the thing that sort of said, all right, we're going to start using this for more than one thing. We better start thinking about the way we use it. Third one is the titles management, the things we use for natural resource and regulatory systems, the things we deal with incidents and accidents in the environment. And we're really starting to think about what our next generation at Gen 4 is, where we're actually talking about that ability to do things differently because we're thinking about those things around design thinking and Agile. So the characteristic is we had to figure out that we needed to use the layer cake between Gen 1 and Gen 2. So that was really important because we kind of wasted a lot of money in the first version by not doing it for reuse. The second one that we really came to was about centres of excellence. You can't have architectural emptiness in this world. You really have to start thinking about the way you look at your license, your models, your integrations with your environments, making sure that you think about not just the one project-based thing that's a really focused outcome, but think about it as a design that really supports that broader use and reuse of the environment. The next part that we're really looking at in terms of our Gen 3 is that excessive reusability. So in our Gen 3 environment, we're reusing everything, all of our integrations, all of our controls, even some of our CMS presentations. And that gives us the opportunity to create product lines that we can actually rapidly deploy. So our typical historical world was an application will cost $500,000 or $1 million and it'll take 6 months or a year. We had to turn that round, so we've got minimum viable products coming out in months now. We've got feature releases coming out in weeks, and that's been one of our really big changes. And that goes really to where we believe that the next version for our world is the continuous improvement, the continuous development, the continuous testing for adding those features. I mentioned the COE, and I've talked about most of these things, but I really think that if you're going to go from small to big, the very first thing I think that you really need to have a look at is bringing those governance and value-adding services that projects don't care about. Projects work with blinders, they go straight, they've got an outcome. What you need to have to make sure that you've got continuity in your service is an understanding of the controls that sometimes the projects will want to fight against, as well as the value-adding services. So you can actually show people what you can do before they actually commit to your product. We've learned a few key lessons along the lines as well. UX and UI, we didn't have experience with either of them. And what we actually gave people was, replicants of forms and all sorts of things that didn't really, go to the customer's real needs, nor did it actually go to our citizens' real needs at the other side of those things. So really thinking about UX and UI and the differences between them in terms of one that's really the beautiful stuff that Accenture and Fjord can do, and the other one that talks a little bit more about how functionally it can all fit together in a way that supports the human use. Functional analysis over business analysis is always a better result. So this thing about starting with requirements and going through to the end rather than thinking about what it is that people want to do and developing a process is certainly one of our big learnings. Product ownership is really important as well. We've been seeing that the better we can collaborate with our customers and the more ownership that they can take, the better the results is. It creates a very collaborative, very unified environment, whereas in some cases where that doesn't exist, you get still that historic tension between business areas and IT areas. And that last one, knowledge management trumps reliance on resource capabilities. We're starting to develop great churn in our environments, and you can't, in the public sector, you used to be able to work there forever. The stints are definitely into the single-digit years rather than the double-digit years that public sector used to be characterised by. Benefits and disbenefits is something I really want to talk about, and I've actually put the same two slides together here, one of which talks about the benefit of a particular category, the one that talks about the exact same thing but as a disbenefit. The platform strategy that we use, picking Pega, it was really helpful about helping us understand our application portfolio and the risk that we were carrying by all the bespoke applications. The platform development, easier builds with lots of cooperation within the business areas. So that's been really good about understanding how quickly we can build workflows and rules and things like that. Reuse. We got some pretty good reuse in some areas, but we found a lot of the stuff that we did in Gen 1, we just got it wrong. So we really need to figure out how we needed to refactor it. Integrations, good set of APIs, very important. We've got, lots of, ERP systems, record systems, CMS systems, payment systems that all need to be linked to. We can't get away from that factor. So integrations is providing a real boon to us. COE, I've talked about that one. Agile methods, we've done waterfall for a long time, and changing out of it's been difficult. And we've been half doing it sometimes and half not doing it. But as we're getting better at it, we're definitely seeing those results. And those aspects around things like minimum viable products are really being a good communication tool with our business. Sorry, I've just gone a bit quickly. Pega government solution, I think, is where we're going to see some real benefits. We've really aligned our 4G, fourth generation world around trying to use functions like that. And cost and price. So one of the things that we've always been able to struggle with is demonstrating the value. The COE has given us a lot of benefits in understanding how we can actually show where we're spending the money and how it's being used, and our customers are actually more accepting of it as well. Now, the same things. Low-code developments, blurring lines between IT and business, can be seen as a really good thing, can be seen as a really bad thing. A rogue solution that puts everything in specialization without an understanding of what the impact is a problem. Reuse. We definitely have had the experience that if you build something at first principles for reuse, it costs more. You have to think about it more. So it really makes us also think about what we're going to have to reuse. Integrations, we have got a couple wrong, really expensive to redo. COE, we've got 3 people. Our CO is practically one person with a half a person somewhere along the line as well. We need to be able to fund that and scale it, otherwise it's not going to be effective for us. So having those requirements for those underpinning investments before you've got the scale is a difficult thing. Agile methods, I've talked about that I think enough. Government solution, culture of the organisation is that I want what I want, the way I want it, the way I'm used to it. And understanding the difference between those two things is actually really difficult for the businesses to understand. They can get 80% really quickly, or they can get 100% really slowly and expensively, and it is still a really difficult conversation. Our Gen 4 opportunities, I think the things that we're really looking at is we really want to push a factory model. We need to be able to get to a point where, for a lot of our functions, it's easy just to orchestrate this from existing products and product lines. We can get more complex as we go up the stack, and we understand where specialization adds value, where inheritance actually creates the speed to market and the balances. Reimagined. I actually had one of those opportunities to go to Silicon Valley and see what they mean with those startup incubators. And one of the key things that I came away with is that you have to actually explode existing processes to imagine them in different ways. And I think government especially needs to do that. And certainly, we really want to push our capability. We collect enormous amounts of data, petabytes of data that is really valuable but not well accessed. So understanding how we get all those things about AI, RPA and chatbots, and I talked a little bit about funding as well, so understanding that we really want to work with our vendor community to actually help us leverage those new capabilities. So our verdict. Pega is a really effective platform. It doesn't come without any stresses. It's not turnkey. You have to actually decide it's something you want to do. But if you do commit to the platform, we're finding it effective. And our generational improvements in those 2 years is faster than any of the other products that we've ever used. Our results are, as I said, improving, so we're getting better at understanding the value that we're creating out of those things. They do take investments. We've started off, as I said, in the hundreds of thousands. We're getting into the millions. We could break the 10 millions, but leveraging all those things that we need to do. In our view, Pega also works better at scale. So I can use the same product 20 times in 27 organisations. That's where I'm going to be really successful. And the other thing that's really helped us with scale is that we've got a great vendor ecosystem and good product support here as well. So again, nothing comes easily or perfectly in the first iteration, but certainly what we're seeing is great collaboration in those environments to improve. And that's the end for me, so thanks very much.